Sahana Vavatu, Sahanao Bhunaktu, Sahaviryang Karavavahai, Tejasvina Vadhitamastu, Ma Vidvishavahi. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So verse 22, we stopped at, and we will continue verse 22 and finish it off. And we started out by saying that Atma, who you are, your real nature, is of the nature of existence. That means it exists. It is the existence from which all things arise. It is the existence that is borrowed to all things. So everything, the tree, the air, the birds, right, the stones, all of this is borrowing this one existence, which is you. You happen to be that very existence. And it is of the nature of awareness. So it is what kind of an existence? It's not a kind, but it is of the nature of existence, of the nature of awareness. And it has no two. So there's no two Atmas. There's no one Atma over there, or one Atma was, more wise maybe thousands of years ago, and there will be an Atma that is even better or somehow bigger in the future. It is one existence, which is of the nature of awareness, which has no divisions, has no two. So when we say the word Sat Chit Ananta, this word Ananta or Ananda, it has a different context. But when we say it is limitless, what does the word limitless mean? Right? It just means there's no second. That's all it means. It means it's not limited by something else, because the moment you have two things, then one thing is limiting another, right? That means I am not this and this is not that. So the moment you introduce two realities, then, right, it's almost like, hey, I want some of that. And this fella is saying, I want some of that. So they're both limiting each other. So when we say you are limitless, that means you are everything. There's nothing that is outside of you. Now, when a person understands this, finally, we call this moksha. This is the freedom from this sense of limitation. It's the freedom from, a sense of bondage, and recognizing your nature to be this full, who I really am. And until this knowledge takes place, the person has a certain relative relationship with the world, which is of seeking for pleasure, seeking for experiences. And in so doing, the jiva wears out their body. This is how it always is, right? The more we move into the world, the more we wear out this body. And by doing so, we have to shed this body and then buy a new body, right? So we're constantly buying new bodies, and we're shedding these bodies. So through this, the jiva can now start to see that if I'm then given this body, for what purpose? And according to Vedanta, it is specifically to recognize your nature. Otherwise, until then, this samsara chakra continues. As we said last week, this wheel of creation, right? You're constantly in this wheel of creation. And every life you have to undergo so many new things, and walking again, and you have to grow up again, you have to depend on your parents again, you have to learn the basics, 1 + 1. It's almost like, from now, it's like an insult. How dare you teach me 1 + 1? But in actuality, every life we have to learn this. And now, if you don't attain moksha and this universe, right, resolves, then you have to wait, and you have to wait for the world to be created. You have to wait for all of the, the molten lava to settle and to give harbor some, space and proper atmosphere for the plants. And you have to wait for the single cell bacteria. And then you have to wait for that bacteria to slowly mature into something that has 4 legs, a mammal, until eventually can ask the question, who am I? So this means you got to wait now, right? Couple of billions of years, until you have a brain that is sophisticated enough to just ask a simple question, what's the nature of this world? And then even that doesn't guarantee, because even then, the person, the jiva, can get caught up, right? Doing and investing and, seeking in this world and creating and so on. So this means one life, the jiva says, I need to discover who I am, because this is the ultimate purpose. This is the only purpose of why the jiva has ever been born. So it's quite amazing, because the jiva has been born countless of times, and yet not once has it occurred that to ask a question, the simple question that Arjuna asked, Am I this much? Am I this much, the small individual, a kshatriya, you know, a scholar, a brahmana, it doesn't matter. Am I this much, or is there more to life? So this means only one life. When the jiva asks this question, then their entire journey starts to, according to Krishna, he says, then you can never regress. Your journey just keeps on going up and up and up. It is a stock market, but it keeps going up towards until you become a jijnatsu. Now, as a seeker, we have a certain term. We have a mumukshu and a jijnatsu. What is a mumukshu? I think I discussed this before. A mumukshu is the one who asks this question, right? What is the nature of reality? And mumukshu, okay? And they're a seeker. So, right, a jiva seeker. A jiva means a sentient being, sentient. So mumukshu is a seeker. Now, mumukshu in the spiritual world are many. So this means it's like a big funnel, okay? And then you will try all sorts of things. You will try aura cleansing, right? Aura cleanse. You will try some sound healing. What else did I do in spiritual world? Give me some ideas.
Tarot.
Life regression.
Okay, past life regression, right? Past life, tarot, you know, a lot of asanas, right? Asanas. This is all, it has its place, right? It's got its place for some people. So it's no question of saying it's useless. It's useful for those who find it useful. So it's a big market up there. And then eventually, so this is all mumukshu, right? Now you come to a point somewhere around here, and this point is called the jijnatsu. Jijnasu. Now, jijnasu is a term where you figured out that all of this stuff that you've been looking at doesn't work. It sort of works temporarily, but it's not solving the big problem. It's not giving you a permanent solution. So you say, well, my real search is to recognize knowledge, okay? So knowledge becomes your search. That means now you want to know, what is my connection to this world? What is my connection to God, to people, to nature, to evolution, to what is my place in this world? These questions demand answers, and answers demand knowledge. Therefore, you now enter into this stage called jijnatsu. So jijnatsu is the one who has specifically is now focusing on knowledge. Now, at this stage, a jijnatsu goes into a process of listening. So that's what we're doing, Shravanam. Shravana, right? So Shravanam is, see, when you go into a temple, you have a certain attitude and you put your shoes away. You don't just sort of walk in with dirty shoes. So there's an etiquette, there's a cultural etiquette there. So in that same way, to whatever teacher we go to, we put this sort of experience aside, right? We all have experience, I get it. We all have a lot of experience in certain areas. Some people have more experience in other areas, and some others have experience in other areas. But this experience has to, or it can become a detriment sometimes by saying that, hey, I've heard this, I've heard that, I've seen this, and it's all contradicting what you're saying. It doesn't make sense. I'm out of here, right? So you have to, for a moment, temporarily subside this mind that finds comfort in confidence. It finds comfort in knowing things. You know, my friend just gave me this puzzle, black and white puzzle. You're supposed to put blocks together and make like a puzzle, right? So you just get a lot of different puzzles together, and then you have to put them together, and you have to make a square, and they all have to fit. And this is for 3-year-olds, right? I couldn't figure it out. There's about 365 puzzles, and it's supposed to test your IQ. And this really kind of, you know, gave me some perspective. So we are all comfortable in our area of speciality. The moment you get given something that's different out of your speciality, something that requires some special kind of thinking, already you figure out how limited this mind is, okay? So in this sense, you have to humble yourself and recognize, I know things, but it doesn't mean that I can override other people's experience. So in that sense, Shravanam becomes a humble learner. That means you have a systematic teacher, a systematic teaching, a systematic pramana, by whom you can ascertain the knowledge of who you are and what is your connection to the world. Now, in Shravanam, what happens while you're listening to an expert, to a specialist, to a teacher? What happens? Your mind is thinking, right? your mind is thinking, it's going to ask questions. And therefore, manana. This is where while you're listening, you're simultaneously thinking and finding conflicts in your existing thinking, and you're removing, with an attempt to remove these doubts, because doubts are painful. You don't want to be living with a doubt. So therefore, you voice out this doubt. Voice out this doubt to the teacher or to the tradition. And every time the teacher or the tradition resolves this doubt, what happens? It's like a brick has been lifted off your shoulders. One more brick. And so the person can walk with many bricks, even while listening. But it's only until you start deliberately removing these doubts that you start to lift off these bricks of ignorance and falsehoods and distortions off your shoulders. And it feels very relieving. It feels very liberating. So brick by brick, right? We remove brick by brick. And eventually that final brick, right, is removed. And we call that the veil has been lifted. Ishvara has lifted the veil of ignorance, and you recognize the reality. So until then, it's a growing clarity. So all of this is growing clarity. Now, even after clarity has taken place, that means you know who you are, then we have something called nididhyasanam. Nididhyasana. Okay, so nididhyasana is, so for example, you come out of a physics class, right? And you've got your honors, you've got your degree, and people congratulate you. But does this mean that you will have the expertise and the application in the world spontaneously now that you've just walked out with a degree? Does it mean you will have spontaneous application, spontaneous, right? Able to teach it, able to, you're comfortable with it. You're just flowing with it, not necessarily. So this means that even with Vedanta, right? Even if you've got the knowledge, you now have to find ways how to apply it, where to apply it, why to apply it. So in other words, the irony is you go back to the teaching. You bring Vedanta back into your life, keep on contemplating, keep on thinking, keep on listening, and every time more bricks get removed. That means more of those bricks that are denying the fruits of knowledge, the jnana palam. The fruits of knowledge are supposed to, right, in a perfect world, produce cheerfulness, produce compassion, produce lack of concern, lack of worry, produce a certain sense of ease, a certain sense of devotion for the world. But it doesn't for most people. Why? Even if you know who you are, according to this stage, even if you know who you are, why not? Because I've got those remnants, those old remnants, old stories, old childhood conditionings, when parents or the society told us we're not good enough, you'll never figure it out. There's more to this, it's supposed to be complex. It's not so easy. All of this stuff has to fall little by little. So this process from mumukshu to jijnatsu to jnani, that's the final stage, or jnani, that's the liberated being. So we'll put a little, okay? So they recognize the nature of this world. And what does a jnani do? Even though they recognize who they are, still nididhyasana becomes a crucial part of one's life. So it's not like now I've done my, listening and I've done my resolution and doubt removal. I am now free, and real life doesn't work like that. It's a continued practice, and thereby through this, the jiva comes to this stage and they solve the problem once and for all. Until then, the jiva will live in this world with carrying these three bodies. Now, what are these three bodies? We said it consists of stula sharira. Stula sharira is the physical gross body with which you are now sitting on your physical chair. It's suspect to gravity. It is suspect to injury and so on. And then we have another component, something that's subtler. For example, I can see your physical brain. I can hook up different instruments and see your physical, electrical impulses, and talk about the physical brain and neurons, but in which physical brain, in which physical neuron that makes up your whole brain, will I find a desire? Desire to eat. Where will I find that desire? Desire to sleep, desire to know who you are. Which neuron will I find that in? I can't. No way. So this means in that sense, thoughts, desires, fancies become Sukshma Sharira, the subtle body. So why is it called the subtle body? Just because it's subtler than the physical body, because you cannot see it. And I can't see your, I can see your ears, right? But can I see what you're hearing right now? Can I hear what you're hearing? I can't do that. I can see your eyes, but can I see the sight that's taking place in you? Is it taking place in the physical brain, the sight? Think about this. Is this sight, this image of this face taking place in your physical brain right now? If it is, then I will challenge that. I will now say, okay, so since you see this marker in your physical brain, if it's in the physical brain, which neuron contains this, this number, 0? Which neuron contains the 0? You're not going to find it. All you will find is electrical impulses, neurons firing, and other dendrites are collecting that data and sending that to the other neurons, neighboring neurons. That's all you're going to find, just a bunch of physical activity. You will not find this marker right now, which is, if it's in your brain, you will not find this marker in your brain. So where is this marker then, if it's not in your brain? That's why we say it's in your subtle body, right? It's in your body that I cannot recognize through any instrumentation. I can just see your brainwave frequencies, but it doesn't distinctly point out blue, white, red. It doesn't say white on it. It doesn't say anything. So I can't find it anywhere in your physical brain. So by that sense, subtle body is not some idea or some belief. It is just an observation based on this logic. Bao, you have something?
Yes. That means that the sciences of neurology, psychiatry, and psychology are far, far behind the concepts. Am I right?
Well, I mean, it's not even a question, it's an observation. As science supports Vedanta a lot, and we're very grateful for science, it would be a lovely thing for science to, in fact, I think they will, right? They will have these paradigm shifts. They've had paradigm shifts from classic physics to modern physics. What did classic physics say? That time and space is fixed. Okay. Now, what happened when Einstein came along? That's when the modern physics started to dominate. That time and space is also relative. This is a huge quantum jump, literally. And so, in that same manner, right? We don't know, but science, I believe, will undergo changes as time goes by. This is the nature of the human being's thought. So yes, right now they are behind, right, in terms of disputing the subtle body, disputing we're not even at the level of consciousness. We're just basically at the level of physical brain and mind. So even this much is not distinguished in some endeavors, in some pursuits, right? So now, never mind consciousness, this is an entirely different matter. But just to come to this basic understanding of differentiating between the physical brain and the mind, this is a huge deal. For example, if the brain was your mind, then what will happen, just use logic. There were open brain surgeries, right? You've seen this before, where the person has to stay alive because that's the only way that you can tell that I'm not damaging your cognitive skills. That's why they keep on being asked tests while they're having a brain surgery. Now, what happens is, for cancer to be removed from the brain, you have to put an electrode and to test which limb will move, right? So now when they put an electrode on the brain, the limb will move. Now, if your mind was the body, was the brain, because the body is the brain, what will happen is that patient would say, I moved right? I moved that arm. But they will say, no, I didn't move the arm. The arm moved by itself. So what does this show you? That means one part was controlling the arm, which was the physical brain, but then the individual, the subtle body, says, I didn't do it. So in other words, if they were one and the same, then you would say, no, I made it. I did that. You would justify and you say that you literally moved that arm. So this is some of the ways that we can show that there's a distinction between the physical brain and the subtle body. Leo?
Yeah, just a quick clarification to do with the jiva. So the jiva is a combination of the gross body, subtle body, and causal body. Yeah. Okay. So when a person dies, the physical body is no longer part of that jiva, but is the subtle body still connected to the causal body there, or do the three separate completely?
Yeah, sure. So the physical body goes back into the 5 elements, which I'm yet to talk about. The subtle body gets reprogrammed according to the new account that is to be lived out. And some Upanishads will say that the subtle body dissolves. Other Upanishads say that it will reprogram. It doesn't matter. The point is, in either cases, the subtle body changes its new course to live out. So in that sense, the subtle body continues constantly. So it's only the physical body that really undergoes this temporary, right, cessation and then a new birth. Now, the subtle body does resolve in deep sleep temporarily. It also dissolves during a coma. It also dissolves during a macrocosmic dissolution of the universe. So there's very few times when the subtle body dissolves, but the physical body dissolves a lot more than the subtle body. So essentially, the subtle body keeps on being reprogrammed, and by that reprogram, you get a new body also.
Yeah, and it still belongs with that causal body then.
Yeah, it still belongs, exactly. So
Yeah,
it's
okay.
always linked up.
Yeah, okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay. Now good, so I'll take that thread. So subtle body, now the Karana Sharira, the causal body. So the idea here is that, see, if you take a tree, right? What comes from a tree? A seed. Now, what's going to be inside that seed? All of the learnings that that tree has undergone. So if that tree has, for example, learned to survive and be more economical with water because of the droughts, then that intelligence is going to pass on to the seed. If that tree had to learn to take its roots deeper to hold itself against stronger winds in that region, that intelligence is going to pass on to the seed. Okay? So whatever life, this of course takes thousands of years. So whatever life the tree has lived, where is that intelligence, that learning, those impressions passed into? Into the seed. Now, what is our seed? You're essentially like a tree. You're just a tree that can, look, see, I've got branches, but I can move, right? A tree cannot move. So you're basically like a tree. Now, what is your seed that you leave? That is what we call your causal body. So this means whatever this tree, this person does, they essentially develop these samskaras, right? And what are samskaras? They are deep-rooted impressions. What kind of impressions? Well, how do you generate impressions? Well, you do so through 3 ways. You got kaika karma. Kaika means physical actions. You've got vachika karma, that means verbal actions. And you got manasa karma, that means your thoughts. So for example, when you, do something, right? Every time you do it physically, that is your kaikam, what do? You reinforce the identity of how you do things. So if you, for example, a car accident, and you walk out of the car in a very calm way, what are you reinforcing? You're not only recalling how you've done it before, because that's what makes you the person. You always walk out of the car calmly, or when there's a emergency, you stay calm, you walk out calm, you walk in a certain fashion. So not only is this walking a representation of who you are, but every time you walk like that, what does that do? It solidifies that impression even more. And then when you say something to that person, this is your vachikam karma. Every time you say, how will you say it? Will you say it calmly? Will you say it loudly? Will you say it fast? Will you say it slow? So not only how you say it is a representation of your current impressions, but also saying anything is going to reinforce those impressions. Or what about how you think about things? For example, suppose there's a thought that you're nursing of someone that's hurt you in the past, and the person chooses not to communicate this hurt because it's an easy way to do, or there's no one to communicate it to. Then what happens is, as long as that thought is inside, the mind, I tell you, is like a perfect nest for harboring more thoughts. What do they call those? You know, when mosquitoes are inside a moist place, a watery place, it's a perfect area for mosquitoes to replicate. In that same way, your mind becomes a perfect area for thoughts that are unresolved, thoughts of bitterness, thoughts of resentment, thoughts of hurt, to keep on growing and growing and growing. So this is why letting it out is so important, because as long as it's in here, it just gets all of these additional food. Or what kind of food? Additional thoughts. So you keep on building these thoughts more and more and more. And what does that do? It reinforces that thought, that thinking. I hate this person. I don't like him. He's done this. She's done this to me. It's unfair. So every time you think like that, that now sculpts you to think that the world is unfair. People are unfair. How dare they hurt me? You know, and then you become even judgmental, right? They've done this and they're like this and they're like that. And so new thoughts keep building up, reinforcing the existing thoughts. And every time that happens, every time you don't intercept it, what happens? You ingrain that samskara even deeper. That means more likely to think about other people like that in the future. So this means until you apply your free will and say, yes, this has happened to me and it's not pleasant, but I have the power to, I'm an adult now. I don't have to subscribe to this kind of thinking. I have the power to intercept this any moment I choose because it is for my own good. And thereby, by free will, what do? You create a neural pathway. And every time you create a neural pathway, you make it easier for yourself to think differently next time. First time, it's very hard because you've got a lifetime of conditioning. But the first time we say, you know, what else could this mean, right? What if they didn't have all the facts? What if I misinterpreted the situation and it was not them who were harsh towards me, but it was me who took it in the wrong way? And perhaps I was a little bit too, took it a little bit too personally. So what if it's my fault and not their fault? What if they didn't have all the facts about me, right? You know, if you look at, I was just looking at Dr. Phil. He was interviewing someone from pro extremist. She was asked, "What do you think about October the 7th, right? Israel, and do you think it was moral to do that massacre?" And the person couldn't answer. Why couldn't they answer? There's a conflict. In other words, the person has been thinking one-sided for so long, and it's been built up such a huge story narrative of what's the right thing to do, my people, their people. It's built up such a huge story that when you ask a simple question, is murdering 1,000 people, which is totally unjustified, is that morally just? The person can't answer. So what does this tell you? Manasa karma. So this means the person's been thinking in such a way on and on and on and on, and it's reinforced this distortion now, and it's very hard to get out of. Now, it's possible, right? So the more you get educated and the more you start to see what actually happened, what's the real story, then you start to intercept this pattern and you make it much easier for you to start changing your thinking patterns. So causal body is made up of samskaras. And what else is the causal body made of? Well, when you do an action, what happens? You get seen results. Okay, what does this mean? That means the world gives you immediate feedback how aligned you are or how much you're deceiving yourself, how aligned you are to harmony or how much you're deceiving yourself. For example, when Duryodhana said, all of these people have come here to, help me for my sake. Why would you say that if you're on the right side? If you think about it, why would you say that if you're on the right side? Does a person who's on the right side even think like that? Hey, all these people have shown up for me. Or does a person who's on the right side say that, hey, we need to protect our, something that we stand for. We need to protect the morality, the social fiber of society. We need to protect the morality of the nation. So the talk is very different when one's aligned with ethics. So therefore, in this sense, whatever you do, you get immediate feedback from the universe, whether you are fooling yourself or whether you are aligned with the harmony. Just like with Dr. Phil and this, who he was interviewing, right? You ask the question just not to be able to answer it. Simple question that indirectly says that there's a distortion. So this is the universe's way of saying there's a certain order. And even if the person is inculcated with notions that are just totally, distorted, even then you cannot cheat the system. And how did this get proven? How did this get shown? Can't answer a simple question. Do you think it's morally wrong for this October 7th to take place? Well, you have to look at the history, is it morally wrong that this October 7th, is it morally wrong or right? Couldn't answer it. So this is universe's immediate feedback. And what else happens with an action? Also, it has a delayed consequence. So this means that you may not see, right, whatever you're doing now, but every cause has a future effect. And that future effect will give you either pleasantness in life, opportunities in a form of feeling loved, feeling united, feeling, meeting a teacher, meeting the right guru, meeting the right tradition. Also, those consequences will manifest in the form of papam. So punyam, all of those pleasant things in your life, they're called punyam. And papam, all of those challenges that we experience that make our life very hard. And thereby, by this way, this punyam and papam, plus samskaras, you put them all together and you have the causal body. So now, how is a jiva created, Anubhav? How is a jiva created, Gautam? So imagine your causal body now, and you walk inside your causal body, and on one corner you have a little bit of, some love over there, some playfulness here, some logical thinking over here, some attraction for, artistic movements. And now you have a pot, and you want to take a ladle and get a little bit of love inside the spot, a little bit of artistic, play inside the spot, a little bit of mechanical thinking inside the spot, a little bit of playfulness inside the spot. And then, so you mix this spot up. And what pot do you call? What is this pot called? This is called your prarabdha pot. So what is your prarabdha pot made of? So we got prarabdha, we got a pot there. Prarabdha karma. Okay.
Complex memories.
Yeah, so we got the causal body, and we're gonna say a little bit of, as I said, a ladle of love, a ladle of love for learning, a ladle of playfulness, artistic skills, logical thinking. So all of this you put inside this little pot, you mix it all up, and you have what's called prarabdha karma. So this means it's one portion of this huge causal body that contains millions of samskaras, millions of punya papams. Samskara, that means impressions, which makes up your personality. And so that's part one, and part two is punya papam. Punya papa. Okay, so this is all of the experiences you will have in your life, pleasant and unpleasant. And all of this goes inside the prarabdha pot. Samskaras, impressions go inside the prarabdha pot. And what comes out? We call this the jiva. Okay. Therefore, what makes up you? Samskaras and punya papam. Okay. Now, Bao, what do you want to say?
I mean, can we say that as we deduce from Krishna's teachings, can we, like we say in digital technology, all of us have a digital twin? Similarly, we why can't we be conscious of the existence of a causal body twin and an astral body or Karma Sarira twin, all along recording every moment of our life and the actions and thoughts we do. Am I right?
Yeah, so if I got the question, the recording is always going on. Is this what you want to ask? The record?
Yeah.
Yeah, the recording.
And if we can be given a tool to be conscious of this recording happening all the time, using our free will, we can prevent papam.
Exactly. So in other words, you're given another tool. So by the time this jiva is born, they're given free will. So this means, look at this. So this means these samskaras, right? And this punya papa will make your life a little bit difficult, but also pleasant, right? No doubt. We all have a pleasant and a difficult life together, mixed up. But we also have certain inclinations. So some of us, or likes and dislikes, right? We want one thing, we don't want something else. Now you can intercept that. You can say, even though I want to play and I don't want to study, I want to play, right? That play is just samskara, as I said, artistic, right? Loving. You can say, using my free will, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to play 5 minutes less. I'm going to go home earlier. I'm not going to stay 5 hours in my friend's house. So you can do all of this. Now it's very hard, but you can definitely, change the course of your whole life by applying little by little by little. So this means it doesn't matter if you're born in a lower position of society or a higher position of society, because even a musician can rise very high up. But what happens? Like Elvis Presley or many musicians, they go down. Or you can be born as a simple peasant and you can rise very quickly to a very high position. All of that is because both people are given free will. So through free will, I can ruin my life. I can equally make my life a blessing. And that's the endowment that we're given.
Yeah. So I have this question. We're talking about a causal body and subtle. So jiva is causal body, subtle body, physical body plus consciousness, as though confined consciousness. So my doubt or question and the things I've been thinking about is since thoughts, which is the subtle body, is also an object. It's insentient, right, in itself, without consciousness. So who is in ignorance and who is getting moksha? Because consciousness is free. I mean, it cannot be that it needs moksha, and thoughts, which is our subtle body, is insentient. Why would it need moksha then?
Yeah.
Who is in ignorance and who is getting moksha?
Yeah, sure. So Adi Shankara says in one simple statement, the one who's asking that question has ignorance. So in other words, who gets moksha? Well, consciousness doesn't get moksha. It's already free. But also moksha entails a state from ignorance to knowledge. That's change. But consciousness is non-changing. So consciousness can't go from ignorance into knowledge, because that's a change. And it cannot be the mind, because the mind is basically just an instrument that's responding to the world. So who is it that gets moksha? I do, right? The Brahman who is seemingly under the spell of ignorance.
Prarabdha also is responsible for this physical body also, right? What kind of body it builds also is coming from Prarabdha only, right?
Yeah, exactly. So this pot or whatever, this is why we all have different bodies, because our pots are different, right? We all went to our kitchen, the causal body. We got a little bit of ladles. Now, did you choose what you want to put inside your prarabdha? Did you choose that?
No.
If you did, who would want a weak heart? Who would want to be susceptible to cancer? Who would want to, have a mind that can't remember its own name, right? Or something like that. In other words, you didn't choose your own parents. You didn't go, I want parents like this, I want a life like that. In other words, it's an impersonal mechanism. It's a mechanism by the jiva putting their actions into this world. They keep on modifying their causal body through punya and papam, and they also keep on modifying samskaras by the mere virtue of acting in this world. And every life, when the jiva drops their physical body, as I said, a new combination of samskaras and punya papam gets taken into the prarabdha. Prarabdha, therefore, then sculpts you as a jiva with the inclinations that you have right now, with the interests that you have right now, with the kind of thinking that you have right now, the kind of person that you are right now. So thereby, this jiva, even now, is doing what? Modifying the causal body. So whatever you're doing in this life right now, what are you almost guaranteeing next life? A consistent kind of life that you're living now. So it's not like every life it's a totally different person. There's no connection. There's a continuation. It's simple as that. And thereby, even now you are, putting a lot of modifications inside this causal body, which will again become a portion for the next life called prarabdha karma. And that's the kind of person that you will be next life. This is why some can come into this life with extraordinary skills. There's a kid called Benjamin in USA, or even Ramanuja, right? Doesn't matter. The Mets kid in India, what's his called? The Ramanuja?
Yeah, Ramanuja.
Yeah,
Ramanuja.
Yeah, so some of us know him. It's from small age. You're just brilliant at mathematics. And what did he design? Cauchy's theorem, or he designed some quadratic equations, one of those things that NASA now uses to help them calculate some, about distance between stars and work out some cosmological factors. So where did this come from? This is what we call samskara. Samskara for thinking logic, samskara for working things out, and thereby it comes out and makes who you are right now. Yeah.
Yeah, but those are all maybe subtle attributes, right? Of how you think and how you deal with. But the physical body, which also may have some ailments or whatever, all that's coming from punya papa, is it?
Yeah, good. It's a mixture. For example, why do you have twins with two heads or two bodies, co-joined twins? Do you think this is an accident? If you take this out, you can't explain it. You would probably say it's an unjust universe. How could God do this? Why would God want to make them stick together like that? So even your physical body and the conditions which this body is enjoying. For example, blacks, right? Black, they're generally much stronger than Caucasians. And, Asians have they're much shorter. So even amongst ethnics, there's a karma there. So that means we also share a collective karma at the level of the nation. And then you share an individual karma at the level of the single body. So thereby, this prarabdha karma shapes two things: your subtle body and your physical body. It's the hands that wields, that sculpts what body you have right now. Yeah. Why do some men, have, hair, that is, white, early, or some black hair, or some women have, blonde hair, some women have, right, different color of hair, red hair? Why? This is all, besides genetics, there's also a karma involved there. So what the medical industry will say is that, yeah, it's genetics, but then Vedanta will say one more aspect. It's not just genetics, it is also your causal body. Now, one thing I want to discuss is, last week we asked an important question Gautam has, and he says, what's the difference between the ahamkara and the atma? This is very important because this is the essence of moksha. So what is the relationship between your eye sense and consciousness? The relationship between eye sense and consciousness is the relationship between this pot and the clay. So suppose you have a very, very ugly pot, right? It's just ugly, like the ugliest thing you've ever seen. In reference to what is that ugliness? In reference to the form or in reference to the content of the form? Now, next day, this same ugly shape transforms into the most beautiful thing that you've ever experienced, you've ever seen before. In reference to what is that beauty? In reference to the form or in reference to the content of the form?
Form.
In reference to the form. So this means wherever there is form, whether it is ugly, in other words, that's what we call, I feel lousy today. My eye is lousy today. What is that referring to? The shape of the form. That means the ahamkara has changed form. Next day, what do you say? I'm feeling ecstatic. I'm feeling extraordinary. What is that in reference to? Beautiful ahamkara, beautiful sense of I. But what is awareing the ugly pot and what is awareing the beautiful pot? The content, which is in this case, the clay. So now, how do you discern the difference between your personhood, your jivahood, call your name, and Atma? Well, one moment you say, I feel lousy, right? You know, my eye is lousy. Then tomorrow you say, my eye is happy, joyful. But what is there during both the lousy eye and during the joyful eye? The content. And how is this content known to you? It is known because it is awareing the lousy eye and it is awareing the joyful eye. So this means that whenever we say, right, that, I don't feel great today. I am sort of, not sharp today. I'm, a little bit dull. So all of these are things attributed onto the ahamkara, right? The shape. But wherever there's a shape, that's exactly where I am. And in the presence of this I am, this shape is known to be taking place as an ugly one, as a pretty one, as a dull one, as a sharp one. So this means wherever there is a sense of I, which is always attributed with some kind of a condition, like good or, happy or sad or depressed or, ecstatic, that's exactly where I am. And how am I there? Because in the presence of I am awareing that person who is going through that condition. Okay, so this I wanted to clarify to ensure that we have some clarity around this ahamkara, which is the I sense, and the real I, which is Atma.
So that doer and joy is also a thought, right? It's a notion.
Yeah, so doer and joy is another name for ahamkara. So ahamkara is doer and joy.
But is it a thought? Like, is it also a thought form?
You could say it's a thought. It's an object known to you, like that. It's something that is it's an experience known in the presence of Atma. Thereby, this punya papam and samskara, they shape the causal. They are the essence of the causal body. The causal body, one section gets taken out called prarabdha karma, and that prarabdha karma is assigned for how long? 80 years, 90 years, or whatever. And that's the life that you're living right now. And thereby, you can be born in a wealthy family, right? And even if you're born in a middle-class family, it doesn't really matter because they can also be very advantageous. For example, the Mindtree CEO, his kid was asking him once, hey, Dad, my friends have all of these toys and, how come we don't have any toys? And the Mindtree fella said, well, because, I'm working all the time and I'm paying for your school, I'm paying for our food, and there's not much money left. So he was very honest, father to his son. But then the son replied, well, yeah, but my kids also, right? Their fathers also work and also takes care of many things. And then what did the father say? Well, son, I want you to learn to be happy with or without money. And saying this to his son had a profound impact on his son. So his son was then able to recognize that I don't need, these things. I can learn to be happy without much possessions in my life. So this means even if you're born in a middle-class family, it can be very advantageous. You can learn humility. You can learn to, learn how to earn it by yourself, rather than having it all delivered on a silver platter. You can be born in a religious family, so this means you have a head start because your parents will also most likely have a guru in their life, will have a tradition that will connect you very quickly. Or you can be born in a intellectually savvy family, so this means they're scientists or someone that's a doctor. So either way, as I said, free will can take you from wherever you are into this final goal. So it's not a matter of where you come from, what country you're born in, what status, social status you are. The point is you have every right as a human being to attain the highest goal, which is moksha. That's the point. Nagesh?
Just to go back to Ashish's question, so that ahamkara, that I sense, that's not real, because when you look for it, it disappears. Yeah, like it's not. That's not the reality. That sense of I.
Yeah.
That says, oh yeah, I'm doing this. I'm thinking this. I feel like this. When you look for it, that there's no actual entity there, really.
Yeah, true. So it is an entity. It's an empirical entity designed to, participate, transact in this world. But the awareness of this entity, right, the doer and awareness, as I said to Ashish, is your real nature. So this pot, right, has a transactional use, right? It picks up water and it delivers it over, and it has a lot of use in this world. So you have to respect the pot. You have to respect you do have a sense of I, as we call the ego. And it's fine. You can't get rid of it, because why? If you get rid of the ego, what are you getting rid of simultaneously? You're getting rid of the content, which is consciousness. So this means that as long as there's a body, I can respect that I do have a sense of I, but cognitively I understand wherever there is a sense of I, which is going through changes all year long, all day long, that's exactly where my real nature is. And how is that real nature known to me? Despite feeling like lousy, despite feeling wonderful, despite feeling tired, despite feeling energized, this is all ahamkara. Despite that, I am, all throughout. And what is the nature of this I amness? As we said, it's the nature of existence. I exist, and it is of the nature of awareness. Awareful existence. Do you know that you exist? Yeah. Now, suppose you're feeling like on top of the world, and I ask you, do you know that you exist? Now, suppose you're feeling like not good at all. Do you know that you exist? You see how simple the answer is? So never mind the content of feeling on top of the world or down there. This is all incidental, as we started out this course. These are all incidental forms. I know that I am. That simple knowledge of I know that I am, that is Atma. An awareful existence. Okay, Nagesh? Okay. Vijay?
Sorry, just this, when you said the pot in that shape serves a purpose, right? Carries water and all that. So like that, if we use that for the Atma, again, the ego, is it the ego that is making us useful or making us experience what we have? Without that, it's of no use, right? You said if the pot is not there, then it doesn't serve any purpose. So, is that right to say that? But
well, the relationship between Atma and Ahamkara is a Satya-Mithya relationship. So there is in Ahamkara a person, right? Vijay that's asking me this question. There's a person called Andre speaking to you. But wherever there's a person, right, that's exactly where awareness is. So there is a person for the sake of transacting in this world, for the sake of discovering their nature, but awareness remains all the time unobstructed, unimpeded, uncontaminated by this person. However, as long as there's a thought that I am, right, this person, then it's as though I am this much. So even though your nature is limitless and it's all pervading, like space is all pervading, as long as the space inside thinks that, right, I am confined here, then it's going to be very real. It's going to take itself this much inside. That's always going to take itself as. So cognitively, the wise person understands, even though it, you know, there is an I sense, actually this, right, my real nature is limitless awareness, which is known to everyone as I am. So I can appreciate, I can respect that there is a confinement. There's a sense of I, a confinement, a sense of I. I can respect that. But actuality, am I really confined? Is the space really confined? No. So right there, that's the wisdom of the wise person. Yes, there is a confinement. I acknowledge that. I don't deny that. But is there an actual confinement? No. That's why I say it's a cognitive understanding, okay, rather than an experiential understanding. Because to experience yourself as something different, that means the space wants to jump over into this space outside it. You see this? And therefore, the experience here outside the pot is very different. It's blissful. And the experience here is just, you know, sort of like wishy-washy, right? So I want to now jump into this all-pervading experience of all-pervading space. No, the space is exactly here, right now. So this means this whole notion of trying to experience something is erroneous because it implies that reality is two. There's two realities. I'm going to jump from one reality into another reality. So thereby, the wise person knows that if all that is here is one, which is known, I am, then, right, where am I going to jump? Where possibly am I going to jump? Nowhere. I'm already all pervasive. But while there is a body, whether I am wise or not, while there's a body, there will be a seeming confinement. Now, for the unwise person, is it a seeming confinement?
No.
It's excellent. Excellent. It's not a seeming confinement. It's an actual confinement.
Okay.
Now, knowledge takes place, and this, now, what does the wise person say? Well, there's a confinement, but it is seeming confinement.
So even a wise person has that maybe a slight trace of that I-ness, but knowing that he is not confined to that I.
Well, there is.
Because for operate or transact, sorry.
So there's no slight. You know, you're either infinity or you're not, right? You're either all pervading or you're not all pervading. There's no. This is the very rare case where there's no shades of gray. You're either Brahman or you're not. In other words, I'm either, right, recognize myself as all pervading or I am confined. So there's no slight I sense. Whatever is about me, that is Brahman. That is Atman, the final reality.
But for him to transact, he has to not feel that, not slight sense, but okay, knowingly he is transacting. Because for him to transact as an individual or as a person, he has to have that knowledge of the so-called pot, right? If we take the equivalent.
So in the presence of I, the person takes place. In the presence of I, the person Vijay is talking. In the presence of I, Andre is talking. This is wise understanding. Unwise understanding is I am talking. And what's this I that's talking? This much. Okay? This much right here. Wise understanding, in the presence of I, there is an instrument that is now moving, that's responding. And whatever happens to the instrument, whether the instrument is killed, whether the instrument is destroyed, or whatever happens, that doesn't touch me. And that is an understanding that's taking place for the wise person.
Okay, there is no I sense. Then he sees that body also as an instrument only.
There is an I sense, but it doesn't belong to me.
No.
Just like there is an I sense for you, but it doesn't belong to me. In the stage of not knowing, the knowledge hasn't taken place, there is an I sense and I am that I sense. So this means I am now going through a very hard time in my life. My life is now falling apart. Me, me, me. Okay? So now it's all about me. Now, when that counts for a wise person, what's the difference? That person still has to go through, right? The body mind has to go through its, right, resolution. It has to work things out. It has to pay the bills. It has to go shopping. It has to, you know, apologize or whatever. But all throughout that, there is a certain understanding that there is a person, but that person and I, we have a Satya Mithya relationship. Wherever there's a person, that's exactly where I am. I remain free of the person depends on me. The person depends on, Andre depends on consciousness. Vijay depends on the exact same consciousness. So what is Vijay now depending upon, and what is Andre depending upon to communicate? I. One I, in the presence of whom different instruments are taking place. Just like different appliances, right? One's a toaster, you're a toaster, and I'm a heater. A toaster has a very different function and different personality to a heater. Now, a toaster has an empirical function, people need to eat, and a heater warms people up. So I can respect your function, you can respect my function, because it's needed in this world. But there's one electricity flowing through both of them. So when the toaster eventually breaks down, then, you know, this heater can, you know, pay respect. But ultimately, what does the heater understand? The real I, which is electricity in this metaphor, has not really gone away. It's still powering up this instrument, which is now paying respect to that, what were you, a toaster, right? To that toaster.
Thank you very much.
Nagesh?
Yeah, just to, again, going from that thread of discussion. So would it be correct to say the wise person cognitively understands that I sense is not the reality? And so, for example, they're in a situation, they get triggered by something, a person or whatever, they will experience anger, yeah? But they don't take it seriously. Like the anger comes, it comes, it goes. It comes and goes. They don't fester over it. Whereas the unwise person, as you before said, because everything, the reality is me, they take it like it's more serious for them. Is that?
Yeah, that's a good point. So that's the difference, is that number one, there's no denial of anger, or these are just things that have to come out, right? Otherwise, you're going to keep it in there and it's going to build up into this huge story. But at the same time, for the wise person, right, there's a certain equanimity that we say. And the reason is not because I'm sort of beyond it, right? Or it's still felt, it's still experienced, but it's not really, I'm not really kind of entangled in it. For that reason, the pain is not as much as it was in the unwise stage. So yes, the difference is that on one stage, there's an unwise person, and every small thing, they call it sweating the big stuff, right? Sweating the small stuff. And every small thing is a huge deal. And thereby what happens? You're unable to think clearly, you're unable to move forward. And the wise stage, same thing. Life is still throwing challenges left and right, but there's a certain composure. Let the instrument work out its prarabdha karma, work out its stuff. It has to, you can't stop it. Krishna said himself, you can't not act because you're full of this prarabdha karma. You're just loaded with all sorts of punya papams that is yet to be experienced. So even the wise person's body-mind will still go through punya papam, but it's not happening to Atma. That's the only difference. And because it's not happening to me, there's a certain equanimity, samatvam, that we say. And thereby, you can work through the situations with much greater composure, think problem mode, right? What can I do next? This has happened. It's not pleasant at all. I can admit that, but what needs to be done? So it's a play. It's a play between working and accepting whatever is going on, and at the same time you're not thrown left. You know, you're not taken for a ride by it. So this was verse 22, and we have not chanted it. I will chant verse 22 now. Vasamsi jirnani yatha vihaya navani grihnati naro parani tatha sharirani vihaya jirnani. Anyani sanyati navani dehi.
Just as a person gives up old clothes and takes up new ones, so does the self, the one who dwells in the body, gives up old bodies and takes others which are new.
Thank you, Bhuvana. So just as a person gives up old clothes, he takes new ones. In that same way, the self, your real nature, right? As long as, right, you take yourself as a jiva, as a person, these three bodies, you will keep getting these three bodies, and the whole mechanism is going to apply to you. So now when you shift your identity from this, from taking myself as this limited individual to that who is free, all pervasive, who has never been born, who will never cease to exist, then this whole mechanism no longer applies to whom? To that one who was never born, your real nature, Atma. So this means it's not like it just, it's still there. Your prarabdha karma is still there. Pain and pleasure is still experienced, but it doesn't belong to me. Thereby, there's nobody to be born now, because causal body doesn't belong to me anymore. Therefore, how can I be reborn? Because as long as my I is placed in the causal body, right? Then what's the job of the causal body? To produce a subtle body and a physical body. So the moment I recognize that even the causal body is just incidental, then immediately, right, I am no longer subject to the causal body, and therefore not subject to the subtle and the physical body. Therefore, I am free of this mechanism, which we call the samsara chakra. So that's the culprit right here. The I is placed in the causal body. These are just incidental. The subtle body and the physical body are just incidental byproducts of having your identity in the causal body. So just like the seed of a tree, right? When we use that example, what does the seed of a tree do? What is its job? To grow up into another tree. It can't help it. That's the law. In that same way, the seed of the jiva is the causal body. What is its job? To produce another subtle and physical body. Verse 23, it asks, what is this body made of? Okay, so let me just look at verse 23 and we'll read it later on. Okay. So what is this body made of that you're wearing now? The answer is in Vedanta, we have a model called 5 elements. We call this Pancha Maha Bhuta in Sanskrit. And for example, what are the 5 elements? Space, air, fire, water, and earth. Now, just to give you some connection, there is also a scientific model of periodic table of elements, right? So elements, that means your body's made of carbon, iron, right? And, oxygen also is there. So this is a different model, and we'll use this model for now. So you're going to say now, where is there space in my body? Well, look at this. Your organs are placed distinctly in every single, right, region where they're supposed to be. If there's just one movement out of their placement in space, what happens? Suppose there's a back disc that's slightly out of place. Excruciating pain. So there is already a purpose to your organs being placed in the right space. If we take air, vayu, so, there is air right now is in your lungs. Also, molecules, get attached onto the alveoli in your lungs, and they get the air molecules, and they get transported throughout your body, throughout capillaries. They get diffused to other cells. So your body has a lot of oxygen in it right now, air. If you take fire, well, where is fire in your body? Do I see, big, shining, head on your fire, fire on your head? No, I don't. But I can tell there is fire in the form of digestive acid. There is perspiration. There is sweating. There is temperature in your body. What about water? Most of your body is water, right? And what about earth? Well, if you burn the body, you will have just ashes. So bone marrow, cartilage, and things like that. So now, which one? Suppose you're dehydrated, right? Let's see if you are water. Suppose you're dehydrated. Do you feel less I when you're dehydrated? When you're filled with water, suppose I gave you 8 liters of water, how they all recommend. Are you now suddenly more I? Are you more you? No. Suppose your temperature is, is sky high, it's very hot. Maybe you're on an island. Do you feel more you now? Are you more you somehow? Suppose the body temperature falls down. Are you less you? Suppose that suppose that I do a little, cut the finger or arm off, right? Does that do you feel cut? No, because we've got amputees who are completely fine. So now, which one of these elements is going to be you? Is the temperature you? Is the space you? Is the air you? So this means that if you exhale and you have no air, if you were the air, which your body is made of, by the way, oxygen, that means if you exhale air, you will suddenly not be you anymore. And when you inhale air, you're suddenly you. You're now conscious, right? Is this the case? Not at all. So now, if you're not space, because I can kind of move my organs left and right, it doesn't affect anything. I can exhale completely, so I can't be air. I can't be temperature, fire. I can't be water. And I can't be earth. I can't be, like physical flesh. Then if they're all not eyes, we'll call them anatma, then how many not eyes do I have to keep on adding to come to an eye? Not I plus not I plus not I plus not I as water plus not I as earth plus not I as air in my body. How many will I eventually keep adding to come to I? Never, right? So this means that there's nothing about, and this is just the physical body. Your subtle body is exactly the same. Subtle body is also made of the 5 elements. They're just subtler in nature. They're more malleable. They're more bendable, more shapeable. That's the difference between physical 5 elements and subtle 5 elements. But it's just 5 elements. So now if this logic applies to physical 5 elements, the same logic applies to subtle 5 elements, which makes up your thoughts, your desires, your thoughts about who you are, your memories. So this means no amount of these 5 elements, which makes the person that's composed, called your name, if none of them keep adding to make you, then you cannot be biological alone. You can't be you. Anything that makes up this body can't be you. Now, the verse says here is that this body is made of these 5 elements, and your thoughts, your memories, your personality, that's the subtle body, is also made of these 5 elements. And because these 5 elements can be destroyed by fire, if I put your body in fire, it will burn. Your body can be drowned by water. Your body can be dehydrated or dried out by air. It can fall through space. It can be slayed by weapons made from earth. All of this is possible to your physical body. Why? Because it is made of the 5 elements. Now, when it comes to Atma, the verse says, because Atma is not subject or not made of these 5 elements, for that reason, Atma cannot be dried, cannot be dehydrated, cannot be slayed, cannot be drowned, cannot be burnt. Why? Because for the simple reason that your true self is not made of these 5 elements. And therefore, this is what verse 23 says. Okay? So let's read verse 23. Nainam chindanti shastrani, nainam dahati pavakaha, nachainam kledayantiapaha, nashoshayati marutaha.
Weapons do not slay this self, nor does fire burn it. Water does not wet or drown, nor does wind dry it.
Because of this distinction between the 5 elements, which is what makes your subtle body and your physical body, and Atma. Therefore, whatever can happen to the physical and the subtle body cannot ever happen to Atma, because it is not made of these 5 elements. So verse 24, before we read, will, in a sense, we can use the word, we can bring the space, some comparison. So verse 24 says that Atma, your true nature, is like space. I'm not saying it is space, it's like space. And what's the true nature? What's the nature of space, for example? It is attributeless, That means it doesn't have any attributes in space. You don't see things floating around in space. It is formless. That means it doesn't have a form. It's not, right, contained to any one shape. It is all-pervading, and it is indivisible. That means you can't divide space. Now, Atma is exactly the same. It's all-pervasive. It's non-divisible, can't be divided by this body. It's formless. That means it's not bound to any form. It's all-pervasive. It accommodates everything, just like space, and it doesn't get contaminated by what it accommodates, just like space. I can have, right, whatever, as I said, music, loud music, quiet music, it doesn't contaminate space. Space never takes on the attributes of whatever's in the space. I can have a nuclear explosion in space and then clean it all up, a couple of thousands of years, but space itself has never gotten contaminated through radiation, right? So Atma is exactly like this. So now you say, well, what's the difference then? Because space and Atma is almost exactly the same. Well, it turns out that there's no example that you can use to accurately convey Atma. You can only try to, but there are limitations. So now the next thing that I have to do is I have to mention you the limitations of space. Otherwise, if I don't, then, right, it's not a full teaching. So what are the limitations of space? How is now space different from Atma? Someone like to attend?
Space is not conscious.
Yeah, good. So space is not conscious. It is I who is conscious of space. How else is space? A good one. How else is space different from Atma, or Atma different from space?
Perhaps you need 2 points to measure space. So if you only had 1 point, you couldn't have space.
Good, good. Okay, excellent. Bao? Unmute.
Vedanta takes a course of derivation by distinguishing, by finding out what is anatman.
No, but the question is, how is specifically Atma different from space? Something that we can all relate with. Is there?
Yeah, I mean, Atma we call in Bhakti devotional literature, we call it Sarva Upadhi Vinirmukta Chaitanyam.
Okay.
That is a spirit or an existence, an effulgence depending on any props of any kind.
Okay, good. So this is what I want. So it is therefore Satyam and space is Mithya. It's dependent upon Satyam. Good, Bao. Okay, Ashish?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, like space is dependent upon consciousness. Like it's just space can be different. Every individual can interpret space as different, like in terms of quantity. For me, space can be small. For another person, that same space can be a big space. Like if we are living in a house and it's a big one, when we move into it first day, we feel, oh, what a big house. And after 10 years or 5 years, we need a bigger house.
Yeah,
So-
good. Exactly. So this, I remember this. I went back to my childhood home, and the space that I thought was so huge as a 5-year-old, I thought, what kind of small space is this? So it was perceived differently. You can definitely measure it, like David says, you need 2 points. So that means, right, I need from here to here, this much space, this much space. So that means I can perceive space in reference to 2 points, whereas you can't perceive Atma. It's not something that you can look at, into between 2 points. You can't measure Atma as high or low, like how low is Atma, how wide is Atma, what's its length, what is breadth. You cannot experience Atma as a different state, like space, like waking space, dream space, childhood space, adult space. Space started at some point. There was no space at the beginning of this, Big Bang. There was no space. Anything else you want to say, someone? I think we covered most of them.
The space can be perceived.
Yeah, space can be perceived between 2 points, exactly. So in reference to 2, it can be measured or perceived. It can
And
be,
can be seen.
It can, yeah, all of this, seen, perceived, measured, postulated, it's a relative according to Einstein, right? You can, it's bendable. So all of these things are attributes of space. However, the point of this inquiry is just to show you that every example has a limitation. So examples are fine, but you have to follow it up immediately by saying, what is the limitation of this example? Otherwise, what the mind does is it tries to now take comfort, refuge in one example and try to use everything now and put it inside one little model. Like, oh, I love the dream example. So now Ishvara is dreaming this world. No, because then if you say that Ishvara is dreaming this world, what are you turning Ishvara into? Anthropomorphic God, right? So this means you can't use, just because my own power has the ability to create a dream world, I can't now say, oh, okay, just like that, Ishvara also creates this world, and we're all just like little characters now. And there's this Ishvara who's now dreaming. Wrong. Okay? So a dream opens the possibility, but it has huge amount of limitations when it comes to the macrocosm example. So same thing with space. You have to know where is Atma like space, but where is also a difference between space and Atma, like this. Okay, Vijay, I know, I'm just going to get through this. So
yeah, all the material objects are all existing within space, you can say, right?
Exactly. So all things exist in space. Space never gets contaminated. In that same way, all thoughts, my thoughts, your thoughts exist in Atma. Atma remains free of everyone's thoughts. Therefore, why? Because Atma was never born. That means it's, it's always the same, therefore. And how is it always the same? As existence, which is of the nature of awareness, which is limitless. So your body is born in space. It's accommodated by space. It can do things in space. In that same way, right, space never gets contaminated. Just like that, it wants to say that this body never gets contaminated by, Atma never gets contaminated by this body or the thoughts or anyone's thoughts, which is what we already said. So therefore, it's untouched by objects. Now, the next verse, it will say, what is the vision of the wise person that makes them not grieve in times of loss? Maybe we should refine that. What is the vision of a wise person that makes them have equanimity in reference to those things that you would grieve for? I don't want to say doesn't grieve, because that's not a human being. That's kind of like denying your emotions. So this we will do next week. For now, I want to read verse 24, and then we will close. Acedyoyam adahyoyam akledyo shoshya evacha nityach sarvagatach sthanuhu achaloyam sanatanaha.
The self cannot be slain, burnt, drowned, or dried. It is changeless, all-pervading, stable, immovable, and eternal.
So as we said, the self not being made of these 5 elements, for that reason, it is not subject to, right, the burning, the slaying, the killing, to the being killed. It is, in fact, it is all-pervading. It's stable, it's changeless, and it's limitless, and it is immovable. That means there's not one moment in your life that you have ever moved. But it seems like I'm moving, right? Now, what's actually moving? Is the pot moving, or is the space moving? The space is moving, right? But why is it? Why? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, good. That was my error, and that was your correction. So you're awake. So the pot is moving, but why does it seem like the space, am moving? Well, in reference to the pot, it appears like I am moving. That's fine. I don't have to change that. That's how it is empirically, but I can understand that, in fact, it is my body that is moving from here to there. So this means when this class ends in a couple of seconds, then when your body moves, what's going to be moving? Come on, what's going to be moving when your body moves?
Jiva is moving.
Good. The 3 bodies, okay, well, not the 2 bodies, right? The Sukshma Sharira and the physical body, they will be moving in the room. But you are already there. Your awareness, right? Here is, when you move over there, why is the awareness the same? Because you're already there. you're waiting for this body to occupy that point of space, but the awareness is already there. It just seems like, right, when this body moves, it's aware now, and when the body moves over there, it's aware over there. But that's not true. In actuality, I am already aware over there on the other side of my room. So this is how this power of consciousness works. It's so fascinating that it's able to fool you. The all-pervasive one, it makes it seem like you are moving, but you're not. You're immovable, stable, changeless, all-pervading. Purnamadav, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamudachyate, Purnasya, Purnamadaya, Purnameva avashishyate. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.